This is a 2020 Porsche 911, the new 992 911, and it's equipped with a manual transmission. That's a big deal because the 911 was only offered with an automatic when it first came out last year, but now manual transmission versions are available. And today I'm going to review this one. Before I talk 911, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is a new car auction website I've created to be the ultimate online place to buy and sell enthusiast cars from the modern era, with daily cool car auctions, including this one, my E63 AMG wagon, which is live for sale on Cars and Bids right now. So if you're looking to buy or sell a modern enthusiast car from the 1980s to the 2020s, check out Cars and Bids, carsandbids.com, by clicking the link in the description below. First, let's talk basics. A new 911 now starts at just under $99,000 with shipping before options, or you can get a convertible model for an extra $13,000. Now, a base 911 Carrera has 380 horsepower, or you can upgrade to a 911 Carrera S with 444 horsepower and a starting price of around $115,000. Or, if you want a S Cabriolet like this one, it's nearly $130,000 before options. The big news here, though, is the manual transmission. It's a 7-speed, and it's a free option compared to Porsche's PDK. You can choose either one at no cost. If you choose the manual, it also comes with Porsche's Sport Chrono package for free. That sounds like a pretty good deal, and it is, but you get a slower car. Porsche says the 911 Carrera S Coupe does 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds with PDK, or 4 seconds with the manual. You just can't shift as fast as the computer. But speed isn't everything, and a manual transmission 911 is an iconic car. So today I'm going to show you around this one. I'm going to show you a few quirks and features. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new 911 with a manual transmission. Now, I've already filmed a more thorough review of the new 911 on my main channel. I will link that in the description below. In this video, I'm just going to cover some of the highlights, and of course that means starting with the manual transmission itself, since it's new. Now, like I mentioned before, the manual transmission is a free option compared to PDK. PDK used to be far more expensive, but now they've equalized in price. Now, that may make it seem like there's some grand bargain happening here, but really the car used to be cheaper and then PDK was a costly option. Now the car price basically includes PDK and the manual transmission is just as expensive as before. That's one of the culprits of the 911 pricing going up. But like I mentioned, if you get the manual, that gives you Porsche's Sport Chrono feature for free, which is a pretty good value. That gives you this clock on the dashboard that's actually a chronometer or a lap timer you can use to time your laps on a racetrack, and it also gives you this little drive mode dial on the steering wheel that you can use to switch between various different drive modes. That's included on all of the manual transmission 911s. But also, like I mentioned, you're getting a slower car. Depending on which 911 you get, if you choose a manual transmission, your car will be between a ½ second and 0.7 seconds slower with the manual compared to PDK. Considerably slower. That's a pretty big number when you're in this range of 0 to 60 times. So you get the manual, you won't be going anywhere near as fast as the PDK. But with that said, there are some benefits to the manual transmission, even though you're getting a slower car. One is that 911s equipped with the manual are lighter in weight than PDK cars. The manual saves about 85 pounds just because there's not as much stuff involved with a manual transmission. The manual transmission also arguably provides the more exciting, more thrilling, more engaging driving experience, which I will cover later when I drive the car. And the manual transmission automatically rev matches your downshift. So each time you go to downshift, the car blips the throttle for you if you're in Sport or Sport Plus mode when you're driving around. Now, speaking of the transmission and shifting, like I mentioned, this is a 7-speed manual transmission. Now, the last 7-speed I drove was in an Aston Martin V12 Vantage, and I was surprised at just how confused I got when I was driving. Am I in 5th? Am I in 7th? It's just a lot of gears to deal with. So Porsche has come up with an interesting solution. You cannot shift into 7th gear in this car from 4th. In other words, you can't be going hard, you're in 4th, you reach for 5th, and then you accidentally get 7th by mistake and it slows you down. There's a lockout in place that doesn't let you shift into 7th unless you're coming from either 5th or 6th first. Of course, 7th will be used as kind of a highway cruising gear, so you wouldn't want it in a high-speed acceleration situation. Now, that is an excellent idea because it means you won't accidentally get your highway fuel economy gear when you're driving fast in anger going through the gears, but you can reach it when you want it if you're shifting from 5th or 6th, another high gear. A really smart way to handle a 7-speed manual. But anyway, moving on to some other interesting quirks and features. One is the gear lever itself, which is, of course, right in the middle in the center console, and it takes up a lot more space than the PDK gear lever, which has been criticized for its small size and the fact that it kind of resembles a shaver and that it's weird. The manual looks a lot more natural in here in the middle, and it fills up this center console a little bit better. It is still worth noting, though, that you do see the shaver design on the levers for the climate control system, so you don't entirely get rid of that look in this car, but you replace it on the gear lever at least if you choose a manual. And next up, speaking of the center console, another interesting item in here is the cup holder. You do have a cup holder on the passenger side, but there's also one center cup holder in the middle, and it's removable. You just push this tab and you can pull it out, and then included with every 911 there's this little storage tray that you can put in the cup holder's place. So if for some reason you have a thing against cup holders, you don't have to have one, you can just remove it and have a little tray instead. And next up, another item I absolutely love in this car is the gauge cluster situation. You can see when the car is off, you have the old school analog tachometer right in the middle, and it's flanked by these screens that have turned off and everything is black, and it just looks like it's resting with the tach right there in the center. Of course, you turn everything on and it all comes to life and there are all your displays and everything important, but I just love that they still have the analog tachometer in the center just looking like it's floating there when the car is off. And next up, we move on to another interesting item in the new 911, and that would be the back seats. Now, to get back here, you move the seat forward, you pull this little loop on the front seat, push it forward, and then you can climb in back. It's a lot easier when you have a convertible model and when you have the roof down. Now, most 911 owners will never use their back seat, and so you can cover it with a built-in automatic wind deflector. Check this out. Push this little button in the center console, and then this wind deflector kind of rises up and unfurls itself to make sure that any wind passing over the windshield when the top is down doesn't ruffle the hair of the people driving the car. Of course, you can't really keep that wind deflector in place when you have people in back, but I suspect most 911 owners will find the wind deflector more useful than the back seats themselves. Push that button again and the wind deflector goes right back into where it's stored, and then you can use your back seats again. Although, like I mentioned, you probably won't, because they're remarkably uncomfortable. Not only are they incredibly tiny, but look, the backrest is completely upright. This is not a position anyone's going to want to sit in for any more than a few minutes, but they're there if you need them. Now, if you'd rather have more storage, there's an interesting trick. You can fold down the seat backs, and it's carpeted, so you can put stuff on there that you wouldn't want to put on your leather seats. That gives you a little bit more storage if the trunk in front won't suffice. And finally, we move on to the last interesting quirk and/or feature worth noting in this video, and that would be the rear lighting. For one thing, you have this giant light bar across the entire rear of the car, unbroken, and it just kind of looks like it's floating there when one of these goes by at night. A very distinctive look. Porsche is incorporating light bars onto all of their vehicles, and it's becoming an industry trend for other brands too. The other interesting item back here though is the brake lights. The two on the sides are fairly normal, but the middle one is odd because it's vertical rather than horizontal like on basically every other car. And you can see when you put on the brakes, it is an odd look. Very distinctive, very unusual to have this weird vertical third brake light, but that's what they've done for the new 911. All right, driving the new 911 S Cabriolet manual. Now, a lot of the stuff I said about the regular 911S still applies to this car. Really beautiful interior, very good all-around car, great in so many ways. But there's the manual transmission to me just makes the car so much more appealing in a couple of different ways. One is it's just more engaging. It's more thrilling to be able to shift your own gears. You just feel like you're doing it. I love it. And more importantly, Porsche's manuals are just so good. The gear lever is so good, so slick. You don't feel any vagueness there. The clutch is really good, also really slick. I know the manual transmission car is slower, but shifting gears adds so much more fun to the experience just because of how good it feels to do it, to do that mechanical process, that I don't really care to lose the 0.5, 0.7 seconds 0 to 60. It doesn't bother me because I make that time up by having more fun actually driving the car. The problem I think that Porsche is starting to run into is that these cars have gotten so expensive that when you're in the $150,000 territory, you're not appealing to people who want the fun, the enjoyment of shifting gears on their own. The enthusiasts are buying 993s, 996s, older Porsche models, special Porsche models like an old GT2 RS 997, things like that. And they're not getting the brand new ones, and so it's harder and harder to justify the creation of the manual transmission. But if you're in that minority who can both afford a new manual 911 and who still wants to roll your own gears, you just should, because it's better that way. It's not faster, but do you really need to do better than 4 seconds 0 to 60? It's just not necessary, especially if you buy the car as like a canyon car, a weekend car. You want to have the most fun possible, not necessarily go as fast as possible. Well, this is how you do it. And that rev match feature too, you know, every time I get in the car with rev match, I'm like, screw that, I'm going to do it myself. And every time after a day or two, it kind of wears you out. Yeah, okay, it's better than me. Yeah, okay, it's kind of good at this. Yeah, it's perfect. And then you just let the car do it. And that's that. And so that's the new 911 with a manual transmission. I know that PDK is faster, but it doesn't matter to me. This is the one I would get. It's just so much more engaging, enjoyable, exciting to drive with 3 pedals and that slick manual. The only real problem of this car is its pricing, which has become prohibitively expensive for just about everybody, but it's also tremendously fantastic. And now it's time to give this 911 a Doug score. And the Doug score is here, 66 out of 100. No surprise at all, basically the same score as the PDK version of this car, except a point down due to the slower acceleration time. The 911 remains the gold standard luxury sports car, and it's at its best with 3 pedals.